Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Self-Aware Leader. This is Ron Altmans with Lead Skill, and I'm joined today by some special guests, and we're going to be talking about coaching and a special type of coaching, in fact, solutions-focused coaching, and how that can move you forward. And so I'm just going to bring my guest right in. We're going to have a roundtable here, and we may have different people speaking up that will feature, but I'm joined by my regular co-host, Angela. Angela Altmans is in the studio, along with Debbie Hogan, Dave Hogan, and Joe Cannon with the Academy of Solutions Focused Training based in Singapore in Southeast Asia. Actually, Dave and Debbie are in Singapore right now as we speak, and Joe is in Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas. So we've got a international sort of production going on here today. But guys, it's great to have you. Welcome.
Thank you
Great
for having us.
here.
A delight.
So for me, I just wanted to lay a little bit of groundwork here. I started in coaching in, where was that? 25 years ago, 1997. I started my coach training and just sprinted through Coach University. It took me 2 years to rack up my 200 hours, but I graduated and I was coaching really from day one, working with people individually. But I was introduced to coaching really by a mentor friend of mine who Angela and I looked up to. It was someone, interestingly, he was really eclectic, had a lot of background, had a doctorate in education and adult education, actually had trained in NLP. He was, getting into the whole coaching world at the time. And in a very non-directive way, I remember us sitting in his office. He was mentoring Angela and I at the time. And he says, there's this new thing called coaching, and you guys might want to check it out. I think it's kind of interesting, and it seems like it might be right up your alley. And it was just kind of lofted and left there for us to, whether we wanted to take it up or whether we wanted to take on another topic of conversation. And we dug into that one, and look where it's led us. And so I wanted to just begin by letting our guests from the Academy tackle this question that I'm going to put up here. Like, what is coaching? What is this coaching thing? Because it's a different world today than it was 25 years ago. When I mentioned coaching, I still remember several things where people were like, so what sport do you coach? When I say I was a coach. Or I remember calling on a company in Dallas because I was doing executive coaching. And I said, I want to talk to your CEO about executive coaching. And she says, oh, we're fine. We've got our executive coach service all lined up. And she meant an executive coach to take people to the airport. That's what her notion of executive coach was. And I was like, okay, we've got some evangelist work to do here to educate the market. So 25 years later, the market is in a different place. But I think it still is important to kind of address the basics. Like, what is coaching? Who would like to take that one?
Deb, go for it.
Oh, well.
I'm going to point at you and you point at me.
Yes.
Go ahead, Debbie. Tell us what you think coaching is all about. And how's it different from things that maybe you were, I know a little bit of your story that you were exposed to and that you started out in.
Okay.
And if I could add something more, Debbie, it's because I think that a lot of our audience is familiar with the word coaching and what coaching does. So I'm particularly interested in what is SF coaching. So take that. I hear too, there are pioneers in the field, and I'm not familiar with those names. I'm trying to read up as much as possible. So you could take us to explain that particular niche, the SF coaching. What is SF coaching?
Yeah, that's a big question, Angela. So there's several things,
right?
And I'm going to invite Joe and Dave also to join in this question. What is coaching? My entree into coaching was in the early 90s when I was working with multinational companies, doing a lot of EAP work. And in those early years, coaching didn't exist. Ron, this was 1995, 1993, 1995.
Yeah.
And then the ICF, you were a part of starting the ICF, as I understand, the ICF Global chapter in 1995 when they became a thing and they really populated the idea of what coaching was. So I'm going to say the definition or my understanding of coaching is what Insoo would say in her book, Interviewing for, let's see, what was Peter Szalbo's book? Not Interviewing for Solutions, but Brief Coaching for
lasting solutions.
Yes, Brief Coaching for Lasting Solutions. They describe coaching as helping very important people get from where they are to where they want to be. Very simple, but yet simple does not mean simplistic. And I think herein lies the unique qualities of solution-focused practice. When it entered the scene and when Insoo and Steve were developing the ideas, it first started in the therapy room. But the fundamental quality of solution-focused practice enables you to, it's got this sort of isomorphic quality. And using solution-focused practice in the therapy room, it was so successful that it really became a powerful, I would say, catalyst for change, thinking about the change mechanism. And when Insoo and Steve were developing the ideas, it really defined what most people thought about change mechanism or therapy or even coaching as it was emerging. So solution-focused practice really established itself as an almost rebellious approach against the prevailing way in which people thought about therapy or organizational consulting or training or any area of practice.
Okay.
So coaching to me, sorry, go ahead. You have a comment?
Well, I was just going to, I was going to notice, so you come from a therapy background and you mentioned Steve and Insoo, the founders of this solution-focused practice, approach. They came from a therapy background and they developed this, in the 80s or 90s, thereabouts?
Yes.
80s.
Yeah. They started, their roots were with the MRI Mental Research Institute, where there is a think tank and there is a lot of change and shifting ideas of how to work successfully with people, organizations. So they were a part of that tree trunk.
Okay.
And Milton Erickson was there. Then they moved to Milwaukee and started the development of solution-focused practice as a way of developing these unique ideas that we now know as solution-focused practice coaching therapy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Steve DeShazer, Insoo, Kim Berg, they were a couple. I mean, their name, but they were married and they developed this together in Milwaukee, if I'm not wrong, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was over about a decade, with just radical experimentation and they were really interested in what their clients thought and what worked and what was sustainable. And then what emerged was this way of interacting with people that very respectfully ask them what they want, how they'll know, and focuses on their resources and their hopes and dreams. And so there's a sense in which the solution-focused therapeutic approach was from the beginning a kind of coaching model. Whereas, in fact, the roots of really all current, coaching, the mega history of coaching, that's about a 600-page book, basically traces its origins to therapy. And, like Deb, she was a therapist, but her clients, who were CEOs, leaders in business, who had been through therapy with her, kind of realized, well, maybe she could help me with this more practical issue, like my family or how I deal with relationships in this organization. Not really therapy, but coaching. And similarly in coach, the rest of coach world came out of various schools of psychotherapy. And I think to kind of get back to Angela's question, what's distinctively SF coaching is, I think, because SF coaching emerged and is built solidly on SF therapeutic practice, which already is a very coaching model. It's more coherent. A lot of therapy, most therapies are about kind of diagnosing problems and naming illness and assessment. And that if you don't do that, somehow you haven't done therapy. Whereas SF goes straight to, well, suppose something amazing happened and tomorrow you are thinking about our time here and you say, wow, that was really worthwhile. And you notice things are better. Well, see, already the very first question puts people in a mindset of what they want. And it creates incredible conversations.
I want to jump in because I love this slide. I think it's a beautiful representation of where SF came from, the roots at the MRI group. The predominant approach to therapy that we all know began with a psychoanalytical model developed
on the couch, literally, right?
Yes, exactly, by Sigmund Freud. And then when the MRI group met and became a think tank, they started to think differently about therapeutic interventions. And instead of believing that dysfunction or pathology happened within the psyche or within the mind of a person, they started looking interactionally into the system. However, what was distinctive about what the MRI group did, Jay Haley, who was a part of that group, wrote a book called Problem Solving Therapy, in that they were looking at the pattern, the interaction based on the pathology sequence, the problem narrative.
Okay.
And Insu and Steve were interested in the solution narrative. So what's happening when things are going well? So in that sense, they were already thinking differently and moved to Milwaukee to start developing these ideas of what happens when there is a sequence of the desired outcome, the hopeful future. Very radical in its day.
Yes. I have a question for Joe. This is our first time meeting. I have a sense that you just have a being about you, that you have a wealth of experiences and rich lessons. So what is it about SF that drew you to that field of knowledge and expertise?
That this really takes me back. I have always been drawn, I got my start in psychology, and I've always been drawn to the brief, effective therapies. So having done my graduate work in brief therapy, family therapy, I pursued NLP. And NLP also came from the rich work of Milton Erickson, and is a very good modality. However, I found that it was overly complex and also somewhat working behind the scenes and not as transparent with the client as solution focus work is. So after many, many years, I left the therapy field. I took a hiatus into massage therapy and personal training. And when I came back, I took a solution focus approach to the work. And I discovered that all the good things that attracted me to these various modalities that were effective were captured and distilled in solution focused work. Transparency between the therapist or the coach and the coachee, one thing. The elegance and the brevity of the work. Focusing on what works as opposed to what doesn't work in a client's life. These things allowed me to work with people effectively and much more quickly. And I personally, for me, much more honestly in terms of the process than I had been doing before, and felt like that was somewhat missing in the way that I worked.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I appreciate you mentioning just the history of some of the work that you've delved into. When you talked about massage therapy, I immediately think about somatic experiencing. So I understand that you're one of the facilitators for the US cohort, yes?
Correct.
And
Yes.
so what are some of the key things that we can expect out of this program for the SF coaching work?
Well, an
I'm going
excellent
to pause that,
overview.
Angela, and I want to come.
Okay.
I was just going to
Oh,
say I'm going to come
we're
back to
spinning.
that in just a minute and talk about the coach, training. But I feel like I enrich the conversation a little bit more around just getting our minds around, or under more comfortable understanding this whole approach to working with people. Even though people, I'm not sure that there's a deep appreciation for different kinds of coaches and different qualities of coaching. Honestly, I mean, I'm going to go right back to this one, Joe. So I'm going to come back to you on that. But I'm going to put this up. Let me just see if I can do this. This mindset shift. When I got into coaching,
Uh,
I have to
are
say that.
Debbie and I the only ones
What's that?
on screen?
No, we're all on the side. So when I got into coaching, we weren't trying to fix people, still trying to facilitate other people. And a good coach is trying to help people be successful. I have to admit, though, that I've come across a number of different approaches to coaching that still center the coach somewhat as an expert, at least within their domain in some ways. And for me, one of the experiences I've had of like solutions focused coaching is you really aren't centering the coach as an expert. It's really about the client and really seeing the client as capable and resourceful and brilliant. And, it's focusing on their strengths, not on, some of the things that might be getting in their way, or what I call what we were saying just a minute ago about the problem narrative versus the solutions narrative. So I'd like to explore that part just a little bit more. Like, help us, see how widespread this problem narrative versus the solutions narrative, even in the coaching world. Who has something to say about that? Go
I
ahead,
would
Dave.
like to say something about that. Because I think this is what makes the solution-focused approach so distinctive, radically distinctive. Because I remember the early years when we were members here, when we first became members of the International Coaching Federation here, we'd go to the ICF meetings and there'd be examples of good coaching, masterful coaching. And I remember there'd be critiquing of, a session. And
performance evaluation, right?
I mean, they would demonstrate it, and then the experts, would tell them what was good or not good about it. And I remember really feeling uncomfortable with this assumption that if the coach did not confront, and really go behind what the client themselves really didn't even know was going on, then somehow the coaching was suboptimal or even a fail. And this is where SF is so different. And that's why there's an efficiency, an elegance, there's a kind of ethical, transparent respectfulness. I don't know about you, but I feel far more respected when people are curious about my hopes, dreams, goals, capabilities, successes, even things where I've failed but managed to get over. I feel better about that than being quizzed on my failure. And what do you suppose? What was blocking you, and why were you blocked? And how often does this blockage happen? When I
You're
do
doing a good
SF,
job of dramatizing it, Dave.
well, when I do SF with people and ask them these more future oriented or even successes in the midst of mega failure, they get energized. They come in kind of expecting I'm something of an expert, and I am a therapist as well. So they kind of think, well, maybe he'll do that with me too. I get two things for the price of one. But then I'm asking them about their expertise, their success. And you can almost see they go from maybe struggling to energized. And it's beautiful.
I want to add.
Okay, go ahead, Debbie.
Oh, sorry. I want to add, you were obviously picking up on our enthusiasm. I also think it's very important that we state that the world, can include many different approaches and many different ways of coaching. And solution focused coaching is different from a lot of approaches, but in no way do we want to insinuate that it's the right way. It is one way. So I want to remain respectful to certain approaches that do say good coaching involves, inquiry into the problematic past or into the blocks. But this is where SF and a lot of models differ, is one of these fundamental ideas about what do we select and what do we highlight. And I'd like to invite Joe to speak on that.
Well, that's an excellent point, Deb, because, excuse me, I need to take a break because when I speak, all I see is myself on the screen.
I put you up on the screen. I did that, Joe. So that's my choice.
Okay, it's distracting. So
if you'd rather see everyone, I can do that. But
I'd rather be talking to you than myself. Although you might prefer me to talk to myself and not to you. Okay, so I'll come back now. I'll come back.
I just say, look at the camera and talk to us. That's all.
Yes. So what were we addressing? The value in all modalities. All modalities are effective to some extent. And we're talking about problems versus...
I would say this. I'm going to put it up, Joe. Solutions focus is a distinctive approach, and I want to say though it's the greatest thing ever. It's superior to everything else. This isn't a beauty contest of coaching approaches, but I'll put this up too. Let me come back. I remember when I was being trained, my initial training. This is back in the late '90s. We had a full module, a segment, 4 modules, 4 lessons, I should say, called challenging, right? About how to challenge the client. Challenging the client is good, right? You can challenge the client respectfully. Mm-hmm. But then there was another class, this is a bonus one, but there was another class that I remember taking called Coaching the Edge. And I remember some coaches taking that as almost a mandate to be edgy, probing the client, challenging them, and like not first or their second answer on the face of it, and like you really got to drill down. And I think sometimes coaches can bring ego into the mix. Edge is okay, but edge with ego, not so good. So Joe, that's kind of where I'm coming from, is like, what are some of the distinctives that are within the solutions focused approach to coaching that really have allowed you to kind of engage with people in a way that you enjoy working with them and that you see some good things happen from that?
Yeah, good question. I'd like to back up just a step or two and take us back to the MRI Institute in Palo Alto, California, where all of this started. And there was a shift, a mind shift, so to speak, in terms of doing therapy and later doing coaching. And that is the site of the problem, or the locus of the problem, not being in any individual. It's not inside somebody. Neither is it outside somebody, but it's in the interaction between people. The interactional view, in other words, came from that. So Solution-focused therapy has its roots in communication. That's what the MRI group was all about and studied. Excellent communication, communication that works best or most effectively. So while solution focus has a lot of excellent tools at our disposal, and we are known for such things as scaling, the miracle question, and so forth, we are not technique driven. We are client driven. So being a communication model, a model of how to communicate most effectively, we deploy these tools in the interest of the client. So we don't come with a preconceived notion of, well, I'm going to use this technique. I'm going to ask these questions even. We get our cues of where to go next with the client in terms of a question or a statement based upon what we just heard from the client. So I would say the hallmark of solution focused work for me, the beginning point in good solution focused work is to find out from the client what it is that they truly want. What is it that they really, really, really want? And we have to listen deeply to that, because they'll say one thing and we go with that and we keep questioning them until it gets to a deeper and deeper level. And then that provides the foundation for the rest of the session.
So this takes me back because, we all carry around, like, I call them mental models, but we carry around a mindset or a map of how things are. And we talked about this in terms of mindset, like, people on the couch. Sometimes we do operate a lot thinking that, as a helper, whether I call myself a coach, a therapist, a consultant, as a helper, I really have to, kind of dig things out of the other person. I got to help them out in this process. And I think it's a really different approach to see the person you're helping or working with is fully capable and they've got a lot of resources, and maybe it's not your job to dig things out of them as much as to facilitate them getting clearer in the process of having what I call a high quality conversation. You mentioned communication, Joe. So I'm just like, I think the thing I've learned probably best as a coach, two things I'd say is listening. Listening is golden, and all of us could probably increase our skill at listening and our whole approach to listening to other people. And then second, questions. Questions are really key of tapping the whole thing about mindset. So what does solutions focus have to say about either one of those things?
Yeah.
Well, if you clear the way for a person to talk about what interests them or to talk about what it is that they really want, they like talking about that. And so it does deepen the way they think about it and how they feel about it. So it brings them to the point of combining mind and heart to where the subject matter suddenly just opens up for them. Debbie, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to speak to kind of a bedrock or an important platform. And that was when I was training with Insu and Steve back in 1999. My whole view became radically turned upside down. I had to unlearn so many things. And the first slap in the head was when Insu started to talk about assumptions. Now, I wasn't aware that I had assumptions. I began to learn that my assumptions were really pathology oriented. I was trained to be a pathology hunter and look for those dysfunctions or pathological or dysfunctional patterns. And in Insu's way of working and representing solution focus, the bedrock are the assumptions. Assumptions. One solution focused practitioner, I think, has collected 100 assumptions. But in our training, we focus on maybe 10 of those assumptions, which really is a reminder that SF practice, so I'm going to shortcut the whole thing by just saying SF, is a reminder that it's a philosophy and a mindset and a belief about how we work with another person. And some of those have a lot to do with what we believe about the client. The client has wonderful resources and capabilities. I was never trained to do that. I was trained to be a pathology hunter. So this was radical for me. Also, the idea of not knowing. I argued with Insu. What do you mean? I spent 15 years and how many thousands of dollars creating some expertise. So this idea of we're not the expert. We are expert maybe in process, asking powerful questions. And the client is a subject matter expert. That's why it's important that we ask the client what it is that you want. What is it that you long for? So it's the way we sort of deal with the time continuum. We explore the past as a resource for success for the present and for the future, not the past as a predictor of more to come, which is the idea of maybe of failure or of more dysfunction. So it's how we connect the client's longings, what they want, the desired outcome, and how they've shown in the past the sort of a resilience model. How were able to learn things and use their capability in the present with what they want and for more of the future desired outcome. So, Dave, do you want to add anything? Joe?
Well, just that
we were asked about questions, the role of questions for the coachee or the client. And we have a lot of solution-oriented questions to ask, but how do we choose what question to ask the client? So there is this idea in working effectively with a client in terms of what it is that they truly want, of a tit for tat process in the coaching session. Everything happens, it emerges, right, second by second or in the moment. So the coach asks a question, and then the client responds. What happens next? The coach has to really listen, as you pointed out, Ron, to listen deeply and formulate a response based upon what the coach just heard. And then the client takes that. So where the session goes is determined on a tit for tat basis. And it can go towards more talk about the problem or towards more talk about what the client wants, but it's emergent in each unfolding second. And that's the role of questions then. Like a lot of people who start out will just ask questions that don't have the relevance or a connection to what the client just said. I don't know.
Dave, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it, at a superficial level, you tend to identify models by the techniques. And
yes.
And so I think where Joe is getting to this deeper, and Deb, and this conversation around the assumptions that we bring, and just how SF is so rooted in a kind of how communication happens and how we co-construct what's going on in this process. Of course, coaching is usually about people come because they want some help. Maybe it's defined initially in terms of problem, but if you explore then what you want instead, and often we call that the miracle or the goal or the best hope, then you address the problem. But you're doing more than addressing a problem. You're exploring a life goal. And then you're co-constructing it with the expert, the client, and that's all personal knowledge that the client alone has. So as an SF coach, I bring some skills, some ability, but it's more attending to the narrative that's important to the client and to their goal, their best hope. And that's what I think. That's why I think the SF approach. Again, I'm not. I've seen amazing coaches from many different schools and approaches, but when helping others learn SF, I find it so coherent, and it embodies what the ICF calls the core competencies almost naturally and seamlessly. If you just take an SF approach, those core competencies show up. They happen.
So the thing that I am noticing is, I mean, as people enter any field, as you're first learning something, there's kind of a natural tendency to focus or even fixate on the techniques. Joe and I have talked about this because we both share, we practice martial arts. And I've noticed it countless times whenever people come in the dojo, and often they're impressed and by the techniques. They want to learn the techniques as quickly as possible and master the techniques, and don't realize that the techniques are great and they are the starting point, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. That there's so much more. There's a whole ethos that you have to take part in. Yeah, there's a deeper understanding behind it. And what I get from you guys is that solutions focus has a similar thing. It's like, if you only pay attention to the questions and try to script this and, master techniques, you're missing probably the greater value that's in a solutions focused approach.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Wow, that was a brilliant statement.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very mindful of the question that Angela put out there.
Yes.
And Angela, would this be a good time to talk about what can people expect when they to a solution focused coaching program?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think that is, we're in a world where we want to know what is the ROI, what is the what am I going to get? Now we've been developing these ideas in Singapore at the academy since I trained with Insu and Steve. We were the first to bring solution focused coaching and certification to Asia. And when ICF came to Singapore and started its chapter, we became members and started to attend. So while we were offering certification all along before we integrated with ICF, the ICF has done an amazing job of branding and of marketing, and they are considered a kind of gold standard in the coach training industry. So we're accredited with the ICF at the level 1 now, because all coaching schools are transitioning into a new accreditation system. And we're accredited at level 1, which will help you to earn the ACC, Associate Certified Coach, and level 2, Professional Certified Coach. And we're now working on level 3, which is an accreditation to earn you Master Certified Coach, is the highest level. What our program does, which is what Dave mentioned, is helping you to understand the core philosophy and ideas, the mindset, how you show up as a coach using the solution-focused, I would say, techniques, but they're more than techniques, and marrying very well with the ICF competencies. And also you'll be steeped in the ethics. So it's important, as you go through our program, it's important to understand that as an ICF ethical coach, you have to stay in the lane as a coach. And we recognize there are many areas of practice like training, consulting, mentoring, therapy. And it's important that we stay in the lane and understand the important differences of these different areas of practice, so that with ICF coaching, what it means to be in the lane as an ICF coach. This is one of the key important areas that we focus in. But we spent a lot of time in the first module helping you to get really grounded in what is solution focused thinking and mindset. How, as a coach, are you going to show up? What do you embody? What do you believe? What are the important assumptions? How we clear our head of some of the things that we are trained and taught to do that don't fit well with a solution focused mindset. So this is a very core module, which is the foundations of coaching. And then the second module is a micro skills, where we learn kind of the basic process of asking the questions to go through a session, the basic solution focus model. And then in module 2, we call it the deep dive. So you know how to ask the first question, but then it's the diving in and really drilling down in exploring. So how do you explore? What do you explore? How do you select the information that is consistent with what Joe was referring to, which is the thread that supports what the client wants? And we have to learn to listen, and how we select the kind of questions that are in direct alignment with what the client wants. So there's these important nuances of how to carry a conversation. And I think after a while, people understand, more about solution focus mindset while learning how to be a good ethical coach. Joe, Dave, you want to add anything to that?
It's a good
I
summary.
don't think I'm going out on a limb to say most people have their eyes opened. Really, I mean, truly, the feedback from all the participants, it's like there is something there for everybody that is novel and immediately helpful, that will enhance what they want to do. And then one more thing I'd like to add: the whole process being such an excellent communication model is so respectful. It's a way of communicating and working with people that is infused with respect and regard for the other person. And those are lovely skills to have and develop that enhance every relationship, whether you're going to use this professionally or just in being a better dad or mom or uncle or aunt or neighbor.
And I want to just throw in this one comment that I started to hear when I was first learning SF. And even now, every cohort, at least one person will make a comment about the takeaway. And it has to do with, the comments will be like, I've come to learn a technique, and what I've walked away with is a philosophy of life. And that's always so moving. Or we hear, this is such a hopeful model. And then they start to share the shift. And when they kind of see how hope is a natural outcome of an approach that helps people to find that in themselves and how to approach the challenges that bring them to the coaching space.
I'd say especially whenever people can take on that philosophy of life that you mentioned, and it's not displacing anything. It's not like they have to give up anything that's valuable and precious to them, but it enhances what they've already got. It gives a new sort of richness, a new perspective on things that lets them appreciate even further all the good things that they've got in their life right now, right?
Yeah.
So I know you guys were going to, by the way, I've left this on the screen for a while, and we'll put it in the comments for viewers, if you want to follow up, because Debbie went through a lot about kind of the structure, the program. If you're interested in coach training, check out sf-academy.com. You can get more information there. You can also reach out to someone directly if you want to talk about kind of your particular situation and if this is a fit or not for you. And so, coach certification with the International Coach Federation is obviously it's available. And so there's a lot, wrapped up in that. But one of the things I wanted you guys to do, and I asked about, could you give an example of solutions-focused coaching in action? And you could tell us, I'm sure, a lot of good stories. in meantime, in the back channels, Angela was saying, like, could I volunteer and be on the hot seat? Let them coach me and we could do something live here. So I don't know if you guys are open for that, or if you'd rather tell a good story of SF in action, but could you guys give us a short demo of what a solutions focused approach might look like working with someone?
In 5 minutes? Are we?
Well, it is called brief, right? Solutions focused brief.
Yeah. Well, that's a misunderstanding.
I'll give you context, some questions for me to work at, and so that after this conversation, I had something to take away as a client. So Dave and Debbie have started a movement very successfully in Asia, with Singapore as the hub, taking it to the region in Asia, from the education sector right up to the PMO, which stands for Prime Minister's Office in Singapore. So that work comes, in distinguished in many aspects. And now you want to bring it to the US and have more people know about this SF work that you do. And I feel, for me personally, I want to learn this on a personal and on a societal level. And let me bring in a specific point so that Joe and the rest could come up with questions, because he said it's the way you communicate questions that allow the client to think more. And the issue that I'm facing right now is the issue of loneliness. And we can look at it at a societal level. Our current US Surgeon General has talked about it and highlighted it as an epidemic in our country. And on a personal level, I can feel the effects coming from an Asian background, having grown up in Singapore. I personally see the subtleties of what loneliness has on me, and I'm not even aware of. In business, CEOs have this issue as well. We don't want to just have conversations. We want to have the right conversations. So where I'm coming with this is, like, what questions would you throw at me as I consider this loneliness issue? As a human being, as a business leader, as someone wants to function well in the society in the US. Mm. Is that too big a question in 5 minutes? All right, thank you.
Okay, Deb, go for it.
I just want to acknowledge, Angela, thank you for the vulnerability and the honesty that you've brought just now. I think one of the beautiful elements of coaching is the respect and the appreciation of people's struggle. And McKinsey report, a lot of information right now says that mental health issues are epidemic right now, post-COVID. I think this is a big theme I'm hearing in my coaching and therapy practice. So as a beginning point, I'm just going to throw out some of the things that you might experience if you were to have a coaching session with one of the solution-focused coaches. Is first understanding kind of who you are, your world, what's important to you. So those questions would be embodied in the different ways that we would inquire about as a result of our coaching. What would be important to explore? You've brought loneliness as a topic, and we focus on what is wanted versus what's not wanted. So part of the exploration would be, supposing coaching was very helpful for you, how would you know? What would be different? And so we start to populate what we call the desired outcome. And I don't know where that conversation would go, but that would be the starting point, is appreciating what you're struggling with, validating. Appreciating is really important, and not moving on too quickly, but just understanding how this is affecting you and what would you want different? What would you want better? That's a real key in SF work. And then I'll let Dave and Joe speak, since we have a few more minutes. I don't want to hog the show.
No, that was lovely and spot on, Deb. Yeah,
exactly.
Tackling a very real issue that so many of us struggle with. And Once that has been established and the coach feels like they have a better understanding of the client's worldview and struggles and so forth, in order to make it workable in the session, in this first session, let's say, we would follow up with something along the line of what needs to happen in the next 40 minutes, let's say, for you to feel like it was worth your time to even come and see me and talk about this. And that begins to scale it down to something manageable in a single session, and kind of builds in an expectancy of something to progress towards by the end of the session.
Yes. The beauty of questions.
Yeah. And also, true to an SF mindset, Angela, would be a really important inquiry around your world, your life, your capability. And we use a lot of what is called partnering in coaching, which is asking permission or interested in where you would like to go and what you would like to explore. But part of the exploration could be, how have you been coping with it so far? Knowing this is such a big theme globally, but also you as a unique Asian American. We want to know, we would explore. So how have you been able to manage? And this is an important thing to surface your capability. And this is a part of Ericksonian influence, which is the giftedness, exploring clients' capability.
Yes.
So he called it the utilization principle, utilizing what the client knows, what they're capable of, and growing that. And maybe there's something there that inspires you to maybe move on in a new way.
Yeah. I like that the coach is interested in my past and acknowledge that I have things in the past that I might be stuck in, that I'm not even aware of, and then writing a new narrative. Yeah,
exactly.
All right.
This is something I came across, and I just want to share this as we wrap things up, that I found was like a light bulb came on for me, which was, we were talking earlier about the problem narrative. We can get really deep into problems, and problems can often be very complex, multiple sources, causes, intermingling, parts of it. And I think one of the assumptions that I carry, maybe many of us carry, is that a complex problem needs a complex solution. needs a very elaborated sort of, approach. The thing that I've been noticing from solutions focus practice is that's not necessarily the case. Even very complicated problems can have very simple, elegant solutions that don't require hours, days, years of deep interior work and getting to root causes and understanding and having insight, that things can literally start changing. I wouldn't say instantaneously, but it could even instantaneously. But the point is, we don't need to think of it as a quid pro quo, this for that, that as complicated as the problem is, the solution has to be equally complicated. So to me, there's a great hope in this approach for people. Yeah. Like, wow.
I wonder if I might add to that.
Go ahead, Dave.
It triggered the idea that, and often in my own practice, I've noticed this with clients. They come in with weighted with a problem, an emotional struggle, a difficulty, a relationship issue that is very complicated, very complex. And, but then their solution that emerges when they talk about their resources, their hope, their accomplishments, just sometimes in the process of getting started, sometimes solutions are not connected to the problem. By focusing on those other things, sometimes the problem suddenly diminishes. I think of one client I had. It started as a therapy issue. An educator, international, one of the international schools here in Singapore, came in with some kind of relationship challenge. And this person just seemed all beat up and almost slid under the door. They just were so big, tall person, but just so diminished. And just in the process of getting to know them, I asked, well, what's been better? I mean, tell me about the last few years that you've been here, and how did it go? And so it was all introductory. And each time you mentioned something, I said, well, how'd you do that? And what difference did that make for your family? And by the end of the first session, he went from just, coming in cringing and burdened, and he was all excited. And then near the end of the session, he said, things have never been better in our lives. And no one was more surprised than me, because I was all ready to be an empathetic, client-centered therapist and to deal with some really heavy emotion. That's what I was preparing to do, and bring my best SF skills. It turned out he still, that issue was still there. He wanted to come back. He came back, and again, it focused on what was better since last time. We never really addressed that initial issue. And he kept wanting to. Usually with SF practice, we have maybe 2, 3, 4 sessions. It's a terrible business model because people move on quickly, but it's so much fun. But he wanted to keep coming. And over a period of we met 9 times over the year, because he was making progress in his life. And at the very end of it, he brought back that first issue. And he had written this very emotional letter that addressed this relationship issue that had triggered his first visit. But, I never really got what the issue was. And I didn't have to. The solutions were not connected directly to the problem.
Huh.
I love what William James is noted to have said, that the art of being wise is knowing what to ignore. And not that we ignore the difficulties that people have, but we focus on what's salient and relevant and helpful. And that takes some practice out of the plethora of information and data that gets dumped on the coaching table. How do we parse through that for what's going to be truly helpful and relevant to the client? But there is evidence that suggests that clients already begin to change in a good way after making that first session call. We call it pre-session change. And how unfortunate then for the person who's already starting to make some progress when they come in to see us and we right off the bat ask them, so tell me about this problem that brings you in. And now we bump them back, to focusing on the problem, as opposed to zeroing in on and focusing up, well, what's been better since you made the appointment?
Wow. So I have to say this, you guys are the real deal, because I know you've got a class coming up in the US, at least in June 6th. The next cohort begins, that you're going to be training and offering this to people. And you're very upfront about this is a terrible business model. And I know, Dave, that's partly tongue in cheek, but it's partly true in the sense that if your mentality is, what can make me the most money and give me the most longevity with clients so that I can just really, enjoy a long income stream working with people over the long term, solutions focus is probably not in the cards for you. This isn't the best approach, because it is brief. It is something that is focused on the client and not necessarily about prolonging this relationship over time. unless there's, a good reason to do that, and the client keeps, getting some value from it, and they want to, stay engaged. So you guys are, being very upfront about that, and I appreciate it. Now, so therefore, why would someone want to be trained as a coach? There's a lot of other reasons than just making a bunch of money. But I would say, even within that, maybe you want to meet a lot of different people and work with a lot of incredible, resourceful people and be challenged as a coach, have your socks challenged off. And so I took that module I mentioned in my coach training about challenging the client. But I think there's a great case to be made why we as coaches might want to engage with solutions focus, because the practice of coaching other people actually challenges us and develops us as a person as much as it develops the client. And you're going to grow a lot in the process, and you're going to meet a lot of incredible people along the way, and you're going to be able to help probably to some degree just by listening and providing a space where people can be resourceful, explore solutions, and then get on their way and get on with living life and, contributing to this world, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And you'll get referrals.
Well, and that's the thing I'm impressed by. You guys just seem to get an unending sort of people just, finding you and seeking out and hearing good reports. What is it that Steve and Insu said, that solutions focus is a rumor? It's like if people start hearing words about there's something going on, you need to check this out.
And check out Dave and Debbie, definitely.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of SF practitioners out there. Many are known if you're on your Google. But this, to be led by Joe and Dave and Debbie, it's a treat and an honor. And we say this not because, it's really because we know them a long time, Dave and Debbie, for over 30 years. So they are, first of all, just amazing human beings that just walk the talk and truly care about people. And when you care about people and want to lead them into better pastures, better places, those are the kind of people that I want to associate with. So thank you for, I don't know how you're able to do this, to expand yourself just in Asian time, but also in American time. But obviously you're given a lot of superpowers to do this work. So thank you for listening to that higher calling. Thank you.
Thank you.
Solutions focused Academy of Solutions Focused Training is the academy that we're talking to. Debbie, Dave Hogan, Joe Cannon, they're master trainers in this. You're in good hands if you want to get some coach training or really life training. And so there's some good things. Check them out. And we're really honored to have them as our guest on the Self-Aware Leader. So guys, thanks for tuning in today, and check out the description notes for more details. You can find the SF Academy there, and we'll have more to say in coming episodes about solutions-focused leadership coaching. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.